talk about a niche genres. A niche denotes, the word niche denotes products, services, or interests that appeal to a small, specialized section of the population. So you'll notice, for example, that Amish romance is going to appeal to a very specific section of the population. Um, Cozy mysteries, in fact, let's say police procedurals, are going to appeal to a very specific type of reader. So there are good and bad things about niching down. Obviously, the more niche you write, the smaller your market. But the more of a niche you write in, the less competition there is. So there is more chance of getting, for example, to a number one on the category on Amazon when there is a lot less competition. As I said, contemporary romance is this huge umbrella, literally thousands of books being published every week in that genre. So the competition is very high, and you really have to sell a lot. You have to become a bestseller in that genre, and to get that little lovely orange ribbon that we all crave on Amazon that says number one bestseller, you've really got to sell a lot of books. Whereas in a smaller, more niche category, you can actually sell fewer books and still get number one bestseller. I have a friend who writes sci-fi romance, alien romance. It is a very niche genre. Not a lot of people read it, but because they're very passionate, the readers are very passionate about that genre. They will read every single book that gets published in that genre. So you can actually make some pretty good money, even though it's got a very small readership. You can still make good money. So this is what we mean by niching down. In a saturated market, niching down helps an author to stand out. For example, if you are writing, my latest books I'm now calling travel romance. I haven't really heard many other people calling that. I actually have a client who's also writing travel romance. And for me, it's like the Shirley Valentine movies. It's people who go away on holiday, or they go to another country or place, and that's where they fall in love. But often it's not a case of falling in love. It's actually falling in love with themselves and rediscovering themselves in a foreign market, in a foreign place. So to me, that would be niching down. I'm now starting to build a brand as a travel romance author within the larger contemporary romance market. So think about how you can niche down. Now, I'm very impressed. Most of you actually did that. A lot of you, when you were sharing your what you're writing, I think most of you seem to have cracked that. If your answer was fantasy and you're not too sure where you fit in fantasy, that's where you might want to do a bit more research and see how you can niche down to really target your ideal reader.
Marla said,
yeah.
Love that.
Good.
So that's a comment more than a question for you, Romy.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Marla. So I just want to do a quick aside here and talk about writing to market. What do I mean by writing to market? You'll sometimes hear career authors talking about this. What they mean is hopping on a trend, trying to write something that is popular in order to make money. Now, there are pros and cons to this. Obviously, if you want to make a living as a writer, it makes sense to pursue where the money is. The problem is it's incredibly difficult to actually jump on a trend. If you consider how long it takes to write a book, even if you are a fast writer, by the time you've written the book, it's been edited, you've got a cover out, and you've self-published it, assuming you can do that, you're probably looking at least a 6-month turnaround. So if you're trying to hop onto the Twilight bandwagon because Twilight's now just suddenly gone big, by the time your book publishes 6 months from now, and that's an incredibly fast turnaround, you may already have missed the boat. And if you're going traditional publishing, traditional publishing is incredibly slow. I have done another entire webinar on how publishing works, but effectively you submit to an agent, the agent then submits to publishers, the publishers then decide they're going to publish you, they do edits with you, they design a cover, and maybe another year after you sign a contract with them, the book releases. So it could be 2, maybe even 3 years from the time you start writing your book to it hitting the shelves. By that time, the trend is gone. So writing to market is, you need to be a very fast writer to be able to jump onto trends. My other issue with that is following a trend if your heart isn't in it. Now, I see this a lot with romance, for example, because people think, oh, there's a lot of money to be made in writing romance. Let's jump on the bandwagon. The problem is if they haven't read a lot of romance novels and they still think that romance novels are like their grandmother's 1970s bodice rippers, they're going to actually write a book that is not going to be publishable today. The other thing, so you have to read, you have to be passionate about it. Readers can tell. They can tell if you're just writing by the numbers to try and make money or whether you actually are enjoying what you're writing. I highly recommend, because it is so difficult to keep up with the trends, it's so difficult to write fast enough to quickly capitalize on what is trending right now. And you have to remember, whatever is trending right now was probably acquired by an agent and a publisher 2 years ago. So that has actually been and gone already. Especially if you're trying to target also traditional publishing, they're going to look at your book and go, no, that has been and gone. So write what you're passionate about. The one advantage is if you write what you love and you believe in, even if it is a completely niche genre, even if it's something that is not currently trending, it is entirely possible that your book might be the one that kickstarts the trend. Nobody thought sparkly vampires were going to be a thing until Twilight happened, and then suddenly everybody was writing vampires. In fact, people had said for years that vampire fiction was dead. Though I think everybody should tell Anne Rice that, because she's managed to make a very long career out of writing vampires, even after they said vampires were dead. The same thing happens with historical fiction or historical romance. Every now and again, you hear people say, oh, historical romance is dead. And then Bridgerton comes out, and suddenly everywhere you look, it's just Regency romance. So don't let people tell you, oh, it's not trending. It's not, because it might be trending in 2 years when your book hits the shelves. Write what you love. And even if it's in a niche genre, even if it's not a genre that everybody is buying and it's not going to be the next big thing, you just need, in fact, I think somebody said this at a conference I attended in San Diego a few years ago. The American market is so huge that if you can just sell to 0.01% of the readership in the US, you can have a solid career and make a living at writing. 0.01% of readership in the US. And that's before you even look at all the other markets around the world. So write what you love.
And then Jordan said vampires are dead.
Literally, yes.
Yes.
Another quick aside, I just want to talk briefly about jumping genres versus staying in your lane. You might think, but I don't want to, I like so many different genres. I want to write YA, and I want to write a legal thriller, and I want to write a fantasy. That's great, but just bear in mind that you might have to then change publishers. Your same publisher or your same agent even might not be interested in representing all those different genres. So it means every time you're starting from scratch. And worse yet, every single time you're starting from scratch to build a readership. You may even have to use a different pen name. For example, you cannot write erotic romance and young adult under the same name, because you're going to have a not very happy crossover of readers. So you need to think about who is your reader, what genre you're writing. And I use the word staying in your lane because that's a term that Melanie, I'm doing a blank on her name. Melanie Harlow, who is a big, she writes small town romances, and she's a best-selling author. I attended a webinar in which she spoke about her career, and she said in the beginning she made that mistake. She wrote sort of like a high octane, very steamy story, and then she wrote small town romance, and she did really well in it. And then she jumped to writing LGBT, and each time it was a whole new readership. And she discovered that she was losing readers. She actually had this breakout bestseller, and then her next 2 books after that, or her next book after that, was a complete dud. And to avoid that happening, you want to be able to capitalize. You want to, if you have that breakout bestseller, you want to be able to convert all those readers to all your other books. And in order to do that, you need to stay in your lane. So I would suggest you need to be able to write at least 3 books in your selected genre before shifting to another genre. So I have written historical romances set in the 1920s. I have also, as I say, I've now moved into contemporary romance. You can do both, but I would recommend don't jump from very divergent books, and don't jump every single book into a different Pick a genre that you enjoy writing in and try and stay with it for at least 3 books so that you can build a readership before you move and before you maybe have to start from scratch, building up a whole new readership and an audience. This is why I say this particular webinar is very focused on building a career as an author.